virtual, enjoying the carnival festivities in Dominica. But of course, our thoughts and prayers are always with those who have experienced loss, have experienced major challenges, are currently going through major challenges right now. As a matter of fact, one of our guests who was supposed to be here with us, Pastor Dolph Valerie, is unable to be here. If you got a chance to see the funeral of Miss Avenel Charles, which is part of the conversation we're having here on domestic violence, she was a victim of domestic violence. If you had an opportunity to see her funeral on Facebook, the young man who did the preaching at her funeral, Pastor Dolph Valerie, he was supposed to be here with us. But again, he is facing many challenges right now, many family challenges. So we keep him in our prayers. We also keep in our prayers Mr. and Mrs. Hans and Bertilia Victor. Hans is a personal friend of ours, so we especially keep him in our prayers, who tragically lost his 19-year-old Nathan Victor, such a promising young man, to a vehicle accident in Dominica. And also we continue to pray for the most vulnerable in our societies as we honor the memory of little Kanisha Etienne. So it is great to be back with you again for another episode of Roots Connections on Q. We have another packed 2 hours of programming for you as we discuss how can we overcome toxic masculinity as gender roles continue to change? So again, how can we overcome toxic masculinity as gender roles continue to change? And just to remind you that this is the extension of a conversation we started back on January 10th with Mr. G on his program, Global View. So I think it is so important that we do not just simply wait. We tend to be very reactionary. So I think it is so important that we do not simply wait for the next tragedy, the next young woman to lose her life, as we saw at the end of 2022, but that we are proactive. So we're going to keep these conversations going. We're going to keep these action plans for how do we intervene. So this evening, we're going to take the perspective of young men. We're going to look at young men in the equation of these domestic violence issues. But as we continue along for the rest of the year, we're going to look at other aspects. We're going to look at how can we empower women, young girls, to not only speak up, but empower them financially so that they do not have to remain in many of these abusive situations, these abusive relationships. So again, this is episode number 41 of Roots Connections on Q, right here on Q95. And I am your host, Simone Mathieu. Good evening again to you. If you're joining us via the radio, good evening to our worldwide listeners. And again, if you're joining us via Facebook and YouTube, I'm going to go ahead and share the live to my page, Push Past 10. But if you're already joining us on Q95 FM radio on YouTube, as well as Facebook, it is great to have you on board. Don't forget, for the best of programming, you can always visit q95da.com. So again, welcome to the program. Our guests are already here with us. Our panel is here and ready to engage. We have Mr. Rasmo Moses. We have Pastor Vaughn, Vigilant, as well as Pastor Dexter, Honore. And to me, it is important that we hear from our men. What was their socialization like as boys growing up in Dominica? And I also think that it is so important that we're having men from different generations, because I want us to paint a clear picture of how boys were socialized then, how boys are being socialized now, and if there needs to be any changes to stem this scourge of domestic violence that we're witnessing in Dominica. So let's give our panel an opportunity to unmute their mics right now, greet the audience, say good evening, and just give us a brief introduction of who you are. So Rasmo, as our cultural elder, our stalwart, let's have you introduce yourself first. Unmute your mic. I think you're still muted. Let's try one more time. You're still muted. Okay, Vaughn, let's come over to you as soon as Rat
I'm
spoken. Oh, here
ready.
we
I'm
go. Here we
ready.
go.
Okay. Yeah. Good evening, fellow panelists, and I think most of you I'm meeting for the first time.
Mhm.
So it's good to be in good company. And to listeners and viewers, I want to say a good evening. Um, Dominica, I'm 4 hours behind you, so just winding down a little from previous activities. Yeah, I'm from Delis in the southeast of Dominica. Um, I grew up in a extended family household, so my primary years were spent there. Single mother. My father has 30 kids all over the island. So that's my primary example of a man, we never lived together, and I never really spent time with him. But uh, I say that so you just know where I'm coming from. But I grew up around my grandmother, grandfather, and I had uncles I spent time with, some I lived with, and but I remember in terms of like manhood, one once I was having conversation. I was young, I was in high school, I think. I was having a conversation with the father of one of my brother's wife, in Pirit Savan. His name was Howard Darrow. And he was telling me how the world was changing. And I don't know if it's a story he heard, but he told me that, or if it's something that he experienced, that in the past, the elderly person in the man, the head of the household, if one wanted to marry his daughter, he tests the men by giving them a node of wood to split with an axe, right? So trying to prove that he could take care of the family, he had to prove his manhood by doing something, some type of labor. Um, and that stuck with me, for a long time because I was always trying to understand it and analyze it. And so I have I experienced sexism at an early age. My mother was a school teacher. I was about 9, and she got pregnant. She was single, and I didn't understand why, but I always heard her say that she never wanted to submit to any man. But I know she wanted to have kids, because she had me and she had 2 others after me. So when she got pregnant, she got kicked out of the teaching service.
Hmm.
And like I said, I was around 9, 8, 9. So that changed my whole life, because it affected her. It's depressing when someone loses their job. I mean, like, I do contract work, and then and when a contract's ending, I, I I start to wonder and feel, I feel the loss of a source of income and my, that type of stuff. Something new always comes along, so um, or something added, and so that changed my life. One thing happened with that. Because she wasn't working full time, she began to do stuff at home, and she began to organize women. I don't know if that triggered her to think about, the status of women and all that stuff, but she was Catholic and she organized the Social League for Catholic Women, and they did stuff around, women producing breadfruit flour, agro-processing and that type of stuff. And Dalis is a sort of agro-processing community, you know, the toloman, the cassava farine, and all that stuff, even bay oil, you know. So she sort of went back to traditional work and did some bookkeeping and other work like that, you know, to get money. So I was among all those women during the meetings because my mother pulled me out of school. She didn't send me back to the school, you know. She kept me home and homeschooled me. At that time, that wasn't a popular thing, you know, and so I got to be a beneficiary of that. That's how I
Mhm.
learned to write. I learned to write well because
Mhm.
she had a teaching experience, and that was my favorite thing to do.
Right. And I can tell Rasmo that you'll have a lot to contribute to this conversation. So we're looking forward to your contribution. But let us give the other guests an opportunity to introduce themselves. Vaughn, let me come over to you. Tell us who you are.
Yeah, blessed evening to each and everyone listening via the radio and the Facebook platform. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here with you tonight. Hailing from the village of Tranto Deepa in Castle Bruce. And growing up, I would say I had the experience to be brought up in a balanced, society in an extended family of 14, nine sisters and five brothers. And I was brought up in the setting of a complete family, mother and father, uncles, aunties, and so forth, and also being exposed to some of the things that happen in society, interaction with all different kinds of persons. So growing up, I had a lot of experience and knowledge from within and outside, and also being involved in a lot of church activities. So I got a lot of knowledge from my spiritual life, as well. And so it kind of gave me that balanced idea of life. And growing up as a young man, also I had the privilege to be part of scouting, which is a very disciplinary, you know, um, organization, which is very important in the upbringing of our young men, even to this day. And so I've gained quite a bit of knowledge, that I'm able to share with and able to view life from a different perspective because I realize there's a lot of things that are changing rapidly in society. A lot of things are going out of the way. And as you rightly said, we need to get back on track, and I can identify with some of the things that Brother Ross shared, persons growing up in a single parent family that has also contributed to a lot of things happening, in society which should not have been happening. Nevertheless, as we are here tonight, we will discuss, we will share and balance, look at things in a holistic manner, and looking forward for a fruitful discussion. God bless.
Yes, yes. Thank you for being here. Dexter, over to you.
Good evening to all who are privileged to be on this platform, and also for those who are viewing via varied media platforms, and also those who are listening. It is definitely a pleasure to be here tonight and to be a part of the discussion. I am very much aware that we should be very careful as to who we allow to speak into our lives, because not everyone will speak positivity, not everyone will encourage you, and therefore me being part of this opportunity is truly a privilege, is truly an honor, and I hope that my contribution will in some way assist someone listening this evening. I come to you from the community of Fonkole, and from a very tender age I've had the desire to bring about a change in my community, a change in my country. I have served as the chairman of my community. And currently, I serve as the vice chair. I spent a few years outside of Dominica. I lived in Nevis for about 4 years. There, I worked a secular job. Worked as a health and safety director and also an inventory clerk. My major interest is ministry, and basically to bring about a change and a betterment in my country, in my community. So tonight I am very much pleased to be a part of this discussion.
Yes, yes. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. And if you're just joining us, this is Roots Connections on Q, and we're talking about how can we overcome toxic masculinity as gender roles continue to change. And this is going to be about a conversation about the value that we as a societies and societies all around the world place on what are considered traditional women and traditional men's roles, including work, what happens when change becomes the constant. So now that you have more women in the workforce, how has that changed the balance in the roles, and what are the repercussions of this change in roles? So we're so happy that you're joining us. We see on Facebook we have Penny Shirley, Auntie Hami, Hermelina Watson is here, Veronica, Laurencia is here. So we want to thank you for being here for this important conversation. And of course, thank you for our brothers and sisters who continue to make time to be on this program. We are grateful for Mr. G and the Q95 radio station for the opportunity to be here with you every second and fourth Wednesday as we continue to work on different ways to reverse the brain drain that we see in Dominica and the Caribbean. We see Lambies on the console, so we thank him for being here to take the calls later. Showing and DJ Shan in the background, thank you for being here. And we will continue. This is only the beginning of our theme for this year, where we choose to invest in me, invest in us as a community. And one of the ways we're going to do this is by once and for all tackling this issue of domestic violence and the various aspects that contribute to domestic violence. So again, we're happy to be here. And you know, one of the things that we started talking about with the panel even before they came on is, I thought, as I said in the beginning, it is important not only to talk about our men, talk about our young boys, but to hear from them. So I gave them an assignment before they came on the program, and I am happy to report that Dexter had the opportunity to follow through on that. We all know everybody has busy schedules, so we can certainly understand that not everyone would have the time. But Dexter, tell us what the question was that we set out to ask young men in our Dominican society, and the feedback that you received. You're muted.
It is rather interesting, and the question that was asked was one that really got my attention, and I really wanted to find out from the young men what were their thoughts. And so I called one young man that I know, young brother, and I decided to ask him the question. And the question is, and I'm going to read the question. I think I have the wrong thing there. Okay. As you get ready for manhood, what does being a man mean to you? As you get ready for manhood, what does being a man mean to you? And the very first young man that I asked, he is around 16 years old. And I'm going to recite his exact words. To me, it means I have to become more responsible. Know what you are doing, and you have to listen to what others have to say. He also added, finding a good job so you won't be broke. The second young man the question was posed to, he responded by saying, being mature and responsible and always set your goals straight. The third one was really interesting due to his choice of words. He stated, it means to me being strong and keeping your head in the game. The final young man responded by saying, it means not being afraid to show people who you are, exactly as you are. It's never being afraid to show your emotions, embracing the differences of others and uplifting those around you. So these were the comments and on the four young men that I posed this question to.
Mhm. Yes, thank you so much for that. So we're already seeing themes emerging: responsibility, being strong, staying in the game. Vaughn, Rasmo, you have anything you would like to contribute? Were you surprised by the responses from these young men? What are your thoughts so far?
Well,
The
for
sim
me,
level headed on. And let me. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Vaughn, I'm coming to you.
love.
Okay, yeah. So they seem to have a perception of what manhood is, which all young men or boys do, So, but the whole thing of caring and being responsible and being economically independent, you know, um, the whole thing of life as a game, the game. What is the game? Because I mean, for the young generation, it can be interpreted in different ways. So I do men's work, and my workshops about manhood. That's how I start to ask the young men about what is a man, just the question, and they're supposed to write what it is, and we discuss it. And it's about that responsibility. That's a common theme. And so the topic is quite interesting in that gender roles are changing,
Mhm.
and so, but they still have that, they have to be responsible for taking care of their families economically, and in some cases, the pressure they feel to do that can have, devastating effects. So,
Yes, yes.
but it's
Thank you.
interesting.
Yes,
In
go
an
ahead.
urban setting in the United States, is different. They it's basically the same thing of make money, but it's like um, music and popular culture has an influence.
Mhm.
So, and popular culture, has especially targeting black men and people of color. Because in hip hop you have get rich or die trying, and those
So there's
type
a lot
of
of pressure on the
titles and
young
stuff,
men.
right? So yeah, I can talk about how I try to undo that, but
So we'll get
I
to
guess
that
other people have
towards
to talk
the
about the
towards the
topic.
latter part of the program. So we'll
Yeah.
get to that towards how do we reverse it, role models, and all the work that you do in that area. But Vaughn, let me come over to you for your thoughts.
Yes, I must say that I'm very impressed by the responses of the gentlemen and the mere fact that they keep highlighting, being able to hold on your responsibilities. That is key for me, when approaching manhood. And also, one of them speaks of maturity, and that shows, your mental capacity. Psychologically, you have to be ready to face this world as a man and be prepared, and in a nutshell, they have it covered. They have it covered. I mean, so it's very impressive from them.
Yes,
Blessed.
yes, and again, Dexter, I want to thank you for taking the extra step and reaching out to our young men, because again, we need to keep hearing for them. What are they experiencing? Because as we know, and we're going to get more into toxic masculinity, one of the problems with toxic masculinity is that boys and men are not given permission to express their feelings, are not given permission to say that I'm hurting, that, I need help. So I think it is so important that we continue to reach out to them. But as we have you guys here, and again, we're happy that you're joining us, let us talk about growing up in Dominica as men. We have men from two different generations. So let us look at how you were socialized as boys. What were the influences? Where did the influences come from? Your peers, your older relatives, members of your church, members of your school, your teachers. Just let us have this conversation about what were the influences in you, especially as it relates to how you saw girls and how you saw women. What was the role of a girl? What was the role of a woman? What was instilled in you? So that is the conversation I want us to have for the next couple of minutes. So Rasmo, let me come to you and let's just talk about how you were socialized and what was instilled in you as it relates to the roles of men and women in society.
So, as I said in my last, when I was introducing myself, I got pulled out of elementary school. So I missed between 9 and 13. From 13, you go to high school. I missed that socialization part. So I can't play sports, not even cricket. I can't play cricket. I can't play football, and all that stuff. So that's where you learn competition. Sports are healthy, but they create a sort of machismo comes in there. So I missed a whole lot of that. I didn't know what I was missing, right? So I didn't get that. My friends did. So when I went to play a game on a day, there wasn't school with them. They were a clique already. They knew the ropes, and all that stuff. I didn't, and so it didn't hurt because I tried to reflect on it. But as I got older, I realized by the time I got to high school, I couldn't kick a ball. I couldn't, I couldn't. So, but the thing is, the ancestors work in strange ways. I picked up a drum and I picked up a pen, and my mother, she taught me to write. So, my father, like I said, he was all over the island working. He was a police officer who later became a magistrate, But so I had uncles. I spent summer holidays with my uncle in Trafalgar, and so I saw what he did, He had a garden, he had animals, he took care of his family, that type of stuff. So, and I had good relationships with all my aunts and uncles.
Mm-hmm. But let me ask you, Rasmo, what did you learn in terms of the roles of men and women in society while you were growing up during this time?
Traditional roles,
Right.
Those who were married, the men
Right.
were in charge. Talking about my uncle, he took care of, his household and his outside children, that type of stuff. It's just like the boys talking about, I mean, that's your main goal in life is to take care of people, and yeah, so that's what I saw, but I make myself a promise. If I ever had children, I take care of them. I have 4 and we cool with one woman though.
Excellent. Even better. Even better. Dexter, let me come over to you. The roles that you learned about men and women growing up.
I will try to keep it simple, but I would like to break it down into 2 parts. I experienced growing up in the rural parts of Dominica, that's in Bells. And I also had experience growing up in Fonkole, that's in town, Rosa North. In the rural parts of Dominica, the time spent there was spent making cabaret. It was spent making trucks. It was spent making catapults and going to hunt birds and going in the river. That was it. In town, however, it was different. We played a different type of game. For some reason in town, we usually played house. Mommy and daddy, and these types of games. And so it was always different for me when it was in town and when it was country. I would prefer the rural parts because I had more fun up there. I always preferred going out. But when it comes to the roles of males and females, I was always taught, and I always observed that the men were always the head of the house. That is how I was raised. The women would have the responsibility of taking care of the home, etc. And so me growing up and observing these things, these were some of the things that really helped shape my way of thinking when it comes to gender roles.
Excellent. Vaughn.
Yes, for me, growing up, on the east side, rural area again, I grew up with playing the likes with the guys playing, tops, and Vepti and what we call sec, you know, and bursting canoe, and those stuff. And like Brother Dexter said, I had my fair share of playing what we call bedel. So make those little houses, those shacks. And yes, one would be the daddy and one would be the mommy, and that was my livelihood growing up as a young boy, and then stemming into a teenage level, exposed to my peers. And as you know, well, coming from the background of the church, I grew up with a pastor, and my aunt was his wife. So I got that interaction from the church too, as to understanding the rules of a man and also as a husband. And also from my father, I saw my father bring up all of his children, those he had outside, those he had inside. He took care of all of them. And that stuck with me, that you should always have that responsibility covered. But some of the times that I deviated from some of the principles that I was taught at home was when I really started mingling with my peers closely to the end of high school. I started to deviate a bit from what I was taught, to be more responsible growing up. And that came as a result of interaction with some of my peers. But what I was taught and what was instilled in me helped me to return back to a sense of responsibility as a young man growing up. So I praise Almighty Yahweh for that. But as Brother Dexter was saying, the roles of men, male and female, were clearly defined. I always known the man to be the leader, sort of shepherd of his home, and the wife at his side to help him, and so forth. We see that changing in society today, and there's a number of reasons why it has changed, it has shifted a bit. And nevertheless, I believe that the man should always be a man and to have his house grounded, his responsibilities under control.
Yes. And I want to thank you all for your very candid responses, because I think that is what we need in a conversation like this. I don't want it to be sugar-coated. I don't want you to think, oh, let me say this response because this is what people want to hear. And I see all the Facebook comments that are already coming in. So yes, Facebook, YouTube, I want you to be a part of the conversation. So go ahead and post those messages. Don't forget to share the live, let everyone know that we're here. So gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong, but pretty much what I'm hearing you saying is that your experience in general were traditional roles, expectations, that the woman in general was expected to take care of the home and the man was expected to earn the money and take care of the financial responsibilities. So the question we are asking this evening is, what happens when there's a shift, like Vaughn said? What happens where there's a shift and women, for example, start taking on what is more of what is quote unquote the male responsibility of earning the income? Some women at this point are earning even higher salaries than their husbands. What is the outcome, the result? And as we're seeing in Dominica, the shift in gender roles can potentially be one of the reasons that we experience domestic violence. And, I don't want us to take a very myopic view on this topic, because there are a plethora of reasons that domestic violence exists. So we cannot just simply zone in on one particular issue. It could be their mental health challenges that we need to consider. There are other challenges that we need to consider. But I think one of the major reasons is because the gender roles are changing. And unfortunately, some of our men in society have a difficult time dealing with those changes. So let us go ahead and start talking about toxic masculinity. And we know that for decades, men have faced the cultural pressure to conform to unhealthy and unrealistic image of what it means to be masculine. Boys will be boys, boys don't cry, or take it like a man has come face to face with toxic masculinities. So here are some of the characteristics. Toughness. Men should be physically strong and emotionally stoic, so show no emotion. Dominance. Men should be in a position of power, and this earns them respect. Anti-femininity. Men shouldn't possess traits that are traditionally considered to be feminine, such as asking for help or showing emotion. being physically or emotionally aggressive, not asking for help when needed, being sexually promiscuous, having a playboy image, having lots of babies, especially outside of the home, seeking dominance to the point that it harms others, taking risk, not engaging in activities traditionally viewed as feminine, like child rearing or housework. How boys are socialized to view girls and women and the implications of this socialization. How can this socialization be reversed? So that was quite a mouthful, but I want you to comment on this concept of toxic masculinity. Does anything resonate with you as I explained the information? Rasmo, I can tell you want to jump in, so go ahead.
Yeah, because I mean, like, what you just read is a reflection of how I teach and what I teach, but is what I teach. But the how is through poetry, a song, right? So if I'm working with a North American urban group of young men, I use hip hop, you know. If I'm working in Grand Bay, I use Creole, Karas, you know, that type of stuff, right? And so it's a way to touch them, you know, because but I wanted to say something that Dexter spoke of, and the difference between the urban and the rural setting. You know, and it's also different too, because as when you become an adolescent and between the ages of 13 and 15, when your body is going through those changes, that's something, it can be so confusing for anybody anywhere in any culture, right? And so the influences, right? And so the primary source of information you have is your peers, right? And so and that's where the toxicity start. I lost some of that, like I said, until I got to high school, you know, because then, you know, my peers in terms of age were discussing stuff in dailies I wasn't aware of, right? And so I get to the city, right? And I discover stuff. I hear of stuff and I discover stuff, including, you know, what they call a lineup. Okay, and so because then I was able to spread my wings and be part of a group. In Dominica, for carnival, you have what you call gangs. Carnival gangs. They're not violent gangs, but they're carnival groups, right? At the time, they call them gangs. Even though I think they still use the term t-shirt. It's t-shirt groups, but it should be t-shirt and, you know, you have your costume. You're about same age, 13, 14, 15. You know, you get together, you plan, design on which cloth you're going to buy, go to the tailor, get your suits made and all that stuff. So it was interesting stuff. And among that group, I used to hear of lineups, you know. And so from then, you know, sexuality and all that stuff. Man, I was so protected in dailies. I never knew about homosexuality until I was around second form, almost in third form, in grammar school. I didn't know there was same gender relations, sexual relations until then. So that's a lot of ignorance, you know. You have to at least know it exists.
Right. So you're saying that one of the factors that we have to consider is if our young people are growing up in urban or rural environments.
Yeah. So that's one of the things to consider. And so the pressure to be sexually active. When you say like between 16 and 18, I mean, you have to be getting it as a man. And girls are labeled.
And if you're not, they call you Mako. They call you Mako if you're not getting it.
Man, let me tell you that. I think I got labeled gay.
Adults only. Put the kids to bed.
I got labeled as gay because one, I was into culture, right? So I wasn't into sports, right? I was into culture, right? I like dancing, but even the girls in the dance group say, you better drum because that's what you do better. That was a blessing. because my drum take me all around the world, you know. So it's you know. And when my children's mother introduced herself to someone as Rasmus' partner, he said, "What, Rasmus gay?" All his life he thought, and he knew me well. And this is a man, we were traveling on Canadian Airlines. We slept in the same room in Antigua. At the time you had to stop in Antigua, right? And I shared time with him. And when she told me that, I was so surprised. I said, but what could all that time the man thinking about me as a gay man?
Right.
You know?
So I think what you're helping us to understand, Rasmo, is that there's so much pressure, especially when boys become 16, 17. There's a lot of pressure. Dexter already told us that they feel that overwhelming sense that the financial pressure is going to be on them. And it begs the question, is that one of the reasons we're seeing so much violence among our young men? Because they're feeling that pressure to be, have the bling, have the gold to attract the girls, have the money to attract the girls, that it's resulting in violence to the point where they're killing each other, right? So I think what we're getting from you is that there is a lot of pressure on young men. And when we look at toxic masculinity, which says that you're not allowed to talk about this pressure that you're feeling, then unfortunately what happens is that some of our young men explode into violence. But I want to come over to you, Vaughn, and then to you, Dexter, to get your impressions, your thoughts, what resonated with you with regards to what exactly is toxic masculinity, and do you see it in your own lives?
Yes, what one of the points that stuck with me from you just briefing on toxic masculinity is the emotional part. You know, growing up, you get that feedback that man has to be always macho and big men don't cry, quote unquote. And as you rightfully stated, all that emotion is bottled inside there, and eventually it's you're gonna explode, and that results in a lot of fits of anger, rage, and violence. And so what we realize now is a lot of people are waking up because of programs like this, and psychologists who take their time and to help men to understand it's okay to cry, it's
Mhm.
okay to break down and share emotion. Sometimes you feel the weight of the world on your shoulder, but it's okay to lean on another shoulder rather than believing that you're a man and you're an island, you stand alone. Because there's the proverb, no man is an island, no man stands alone. So, growing up, you get that kind of feedback when it comes to manhood, that you should not show so much of an emotion, and that has affected our men tremendously. And another area you touch, is the aspect of responsibilities in the home. But if I were to take it from a spiritual perspective, when Almighty Yahweh created man, man had responsibilities from creation. So, in other words, man was already created to take care of the home. And so when the woman came, she came to assist him to carry out the roles that he was already undertaking. And in the bracket, in the sense of marriage, in the perimeters of marriage, a woman earning a bigger salary than you should never be looked up as a problem, because when you are married, you are one. So it's one currency. And so I have weaknesses and you have strengths, and you have strength and I have weaknesses. When we come together in that setting, we don't look at each other in a form of competitiveness. And that's the reason why we find some men, because of their ego, if the woman is getting more income than them, then you find that they lack some self-confidence. But it's okay for my wife to manage the finances and bring in the bigger salary because we're working together. But growing up, you get that sense that the man, should always have the bigger portion and always have the final say. And as a result of that, it has affected our men tremendously. So we really need to revisit a lot of things. And especially, I'm appealing to the churches, we need to look at things in a holistic manner and not in a narrow perspective.
Yeah, some excellent points, Vaughn. And I'm happy that we keep going back to finances, because that is a major source of conflict in many
Mhm.
relationships. And I think the reason that we are seeing this is because we have placed a lot of value on the ability to earn money. So I think
Mhm.
one of the reasons that, women are seen as less valuable, and it is true, because let's think of even pay inequality. There are many ways that society tells women that we are of less value, right? But I think what we're seeing is that we have placed this exorbitant amount of value on who earns the money. So when the man earns the money, he is powerful. But then the work in the home is seen as less valuable. So despite the fact that
Mhm.
a man might work for 8 hours and a woman spends 12 hours on cleaning and cooking and rearing the children and ensuring that everything is in order, right? There is so much less value placed on that. So then when we're asking men to take on some of that responsibility, we're almost asking him to devalue himself, right? And let me just say this while we're on this
Mhm.
topic, men, if you're watching your children, you're not babysitting, right? Because
That's
that
right.
is some of the things that I hear, that a man says,
Mhm.
"Oh, I have to babysit my children." Why do you think
Mhm.
he's saying he has to babysit his children? Because
I
he's
know.
always saying that is beneath me. That is woman's work. So I think we have to get beyond that
That's right.
concept that money is a more value than the work that is done around the house. And Vaughn, you said it so well. What we should
Mhm.
be focused on is a partnership, right?
Mhm.
So I might be stronger in the area of finance. My husband loves to cook. He's a better chef than I am. So he takes
Mhm.
on the responsibility of cooking for the holidays, and I sit back. So maybe what we ought to change is the concept of this whole thing of woman work and men work. And don't get me started on changing poopy diapers, right?
I
Because
know.
that is like asking a man to go to the moon to get water, many men, which is quite unfortunate. So rather than get stuck between men's work and women's work, why don't we just focus on what is going to be for the benefit of our family? What is going to be able to elevate our family so that we do not have all this conflict in relationships that can potentially lead to violence? But Dexter, let me come over to you. Your thoughts on toxic masculinity and what resonated with you.
I have been awaiting this definition for a while. I researched it, but I really wanted to hear it from you.
Yes.
It is rather interesting, the wording that is used, and when you think of the word toxic, to me that is not good. That is not good. And I would just, in response to that, I would just share some of my experience even while growing up. I was I was always taught that you have to be strong, and yes, we have to be strong. But when we consider the context in
Strong
which it
mentally.
is it, it, is- it is it
Yes.
is it is said, it is saying to me that no matter what you go through, you're not supposed to shed any emotions. You're supposed to just suck in everything. A few years ago, I was going through some challenges in my life, at around 30 years old. And even at that age, um, there were others telling me, "Oh, don't worry about this. Or you're not supposed to cry. Or just forget about this." And as men, we do have emotions, and we should be able to express it. But going back to some of the things that you mentioned, I do believe that there are roles for males, and I do believe that there are roles for females. What I believe is important, what needs to be done, is a matter of educating young men and women as to their roles, and creating a greater understanding. Because it's not about who makes the most money. In my home, my wife manages my money, and I have no issues with that. She is better at that than me. And as a result, I allow her to do it. And that doesn't mean that I'm not the head of my house.
That's right.
It doesn't mean that. So I believe it's a matter of re educating and helping young people and individuals understand that there are different roles. And when we understand our roles and function within our capacity, then we will have a beautiful home. Our society will be different. As we speak on the subject of society, my concept or my belief is that the home is the primary institution of learning. So
That's
from the
right.
home, we need to educate instead of just sharing fancy stories, but share information that will truly impact and help the young people understand their roles clearly. So when difficulties arise, when the woman makes more money, or when she is more educated, she will not use that as a weapon or as a tool to belittle her
That's
husband.
right.
She will always understand and remember her God-given responsibility as a woman in the home. I had a perfect example of this a few years ago. A brother of mine, he wasn't that educated, but he was very skilled. And even when we speak on the subject of education, my mind is a little bit warped where that is concerned, because I strongly believe that one can be educated in so many ways. Some of the most educated men I've met were men who have not completed high school. But this brother, he wasn't that educated, but his wife was. I think she had a master's degree. And I think by now she had a doctor's degree. I spent quite a few time interacting with them. And one of the things that I observed is that though she had a bigger job, she made more money, she never disrespected her husband, she never belittled him. He always held the position as head of his home. And I believe that is because of a mutual understanding of responsibilities in the home. That's just my 2 cents for now.
Well, I have to tell you guys are firing on all cylinders this evening because you're hitting the points on the nail on the head. And I think what your contribution, Dexter, just brought to mind is that, within our own family circles, we have to figure out what works for us. So in
Yes.
some family situations, a traditional role works just perfectly as long as people do not feel devalued for their service, as long as we don't have men coming home and say, well, what did you do all day? Right? As if,
That's right.
the fact that they're out getting ready, they have to get dressed, they have to go to a job, that is more valuable than what your wife is or your girlfriend is doing at work. So I think we have to figure out in our particular situations, in our particular households, what does that look like? And I'm also happy that you raised the point of not belittling your partner. Because some women are guilty of that, I'm the bread owner, the bread earner, and that again, the source of the income seems to be the source of power in many
Yes.
relationships. So while they may agree on the surface that, yes, I'm going to go out to work and I'm going to earn the income, somehow it diminishes the value that they see in their husbands. And then before you know it, they begin to belittle, as you say, their husbands. So I think it is so important that we do not create static roles where we draw a permanent line in the sand and say, this is what you do, this is what I do. I earn the money, so I'm more valuable. You do the housework, so you're less valuable. And like Glenda said, we can just, live in harmony if we choose to appreciate each other. I see we're coming up on the top of the hour, so we're going to take those phone calls and those Facebook Live comments in a little while. But just a reminder that you're listening to Roots Connections on Q. We are joined by three very intelligent, very informed men, Mr. Rasmo Moses out there in California, and in Dominica we have Mr. Vaughn Vigilant and Mr. Dexter Honore, and we're talking about how do we overcome toxic masculinity as gender roles continue to change. So do either one of one of you guys want to make any comments before we go to the calls?
Yeah, because we're
Yes,
focusing a lot on the economics. We're focusing a lot on the economics. But
yes,
the whole
Yes.
thing of socialization is not
yes,
just an economic thing. So
absolutely.
I want to reflect. Can I share a poem? It's
Yes,
short.
go ahead, go ahead.
Ever since I was
Mhm.
small, I tried to understand what it really, really means to be a man. Because some things I learned since I was a baby, like pink for a girl and blue for me. So I ask myself constantly, what does it really, really mean to be manly in a pink and a blue society? My daddy, he said, big boys don't cry. My bigger brother, Junior, tried to explain why. He said, in this life, you gotta be rough and tough. Ain't no woman gonna love you if you are soft. You better act like a man. You better act like a man. My homies, they teach me the craftsmanship of how to maintain a relationship. They say, you better have one or two on the side. And from the main one, those on the side, you must hide. You better act like a man. You better act like a man. You better act like a man. You better. The media, the movies, entertainment industry teach us about guns, drugs, illicit sex, violence constantly. The magazine ads, the billboards, they go so far. They say in order to be a superstar, you have to wear expensive gear or drive that fancy car. You better act like a man. You better act like a man. Because we're talking about funerals and our sisters who died. That type of socialization tells you can have one or two on the side. You're the boss, materialistic, you control things. And I really object to the reference of man as the head of the household. That is a bias. And we say it comes from God. I don't believe God tells us that.
Dexter, your response?
I will allow Vaughn to go first.
Vaughn?
All right. In terms of the headship, this always comes up, right? And in the assembly where we have a lot of family discussions, very open, we explore things in its entirety. When we speak of head, we don't speak of a manipulative position. We don't speak of head as one that is ever dominant and always has the final say. When we speak of head, it's just as a sense of being the general overseer of the home, the leader, to show some sense of leadership. But remember that you are working with your other half, all right? And so it's not always about you. It's not always about you. If we were to look at it from the perspective of nature in animal kingdom, the lion is said to be the king of the jungle, and he is the king, he's the leader of the pack. The wolves also have somebody who's the leader of the pack, and most time it's the dominant male. But it doesn't mean that you should have that sense of like you're a slave master and so forth, because God will never want you to enslave your wife, all right? He never wants you to feel like you own you that kind of person where she don't have no say and it's all about you. But when we speak of head, we speak of it as a sense of leadership, and that leadership is just in that nutshell, but not to be dominant as you are always the one with the final say.
And I'm happy that Rasmo brought that up. Thank you, Vaughn. I'm happy that Rasmo, because that is a source of extreme contention in many relationships. This whole concept of the man as the head of the household, and it begs the question of the influence of religion. But Vaughn, just to challenge you a little bit, the leader of the bee colony is a queen. So are we saying that men are the head of the household because of their anatomy? What qualifies him besides religious doctrine? What qualifies the man as being the head of the household? And should we have this focus on who is the head? Is this just creating a source of contention? Should we eliminate that expression altogether and say that we are partners rather than focusing on who is the head? And are you the head because it's based on your anatomy, the fact that your genitals are male and mine are female? Right? So Dexter, I want to come to you. Rasmo, thank you so much for raising that important point.
Yes, I would like to respond by calling our attention to the book of Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 to 24. And
that's right.
When we speak of a headship,
Mhm.
I believe many have a misconception, a misunderstanding as to what the Bible really means when it says headship. Even when we speak on the subject of submission, that
Mhm.
word alone is a taboo to many women. And again,
Yeah.
it's a matter of misinformation. It's a matter of not understanding clearly what the Bible teaches. Because I could recall a sister said one time to her husband that her husband said, "I'm the head." And she responded by saying, "I'm the neck."
Mhm.
Yeah.
So one cannot go without the other. So there needs to be a certain level of understanding. And Peter
Mutually.
said that husbands need to dwell with their wives according to knowledge, not
That's right.
forcefully in any toxic way. The whole idea of
That's
knowledge
right.
carries the idea of understanding. The Bible also uses the word honor. So if one honors his wife, he will not treat her in any toxic way. He will be understanding. And as a head, as a leader of your home, you're not going to lead with an iron fist all the time. I mean, there are times as a man, you would have to stand up because there are certain decisions that has to be taken, and sometimes a man could take that by himself. But an understanding man will consult his spouse and come to a common understanding. So we need to understand the Bible the way it is written. And if we were to talk about language and we were to go back down into the ancient language, the Hebrew language, it will open up a lot more to us and bring more understanding. So not only should the husband submit, but the Bible also, sorry, not only should the wife submit, but the Bible also teaches that the husband should submit to. So
Mhm.
That's right.
there is a lot to discuss.
Mhm.
So you're talking
There
about
Symbiosis.
a
is a lot to
partnership.
discuss. Rasmo, let me come to you.
Okay. He's talking about a partnership,
Yes, a
right? Not a
partnership.
head and a tail.
Mhm.
It's a partnership.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You know?
Yes.
Because it begs the question, does the terminology get in the way? The fact that we're using the head of the household, and again, if that works for you traditionally, that is absolutely fine. But does the words sting? Because I think for most women, when they hear the word submit, it stings that I'm supposed to be subservient to you. But the other part of the Bible verse that often gets overlooked in that is the same way that the woman is asked to submit to her husband, the husband is asked to submit to his wife as Christ
Interchangeably.
submitted to the church. So this whole thing about iron fist and making unilateral decisions, that has to be set aside because I think that just creates a lot of confusion, a lot of contention in the home. But let us pause. Let us drink some water if you need to. Thank you so much, everyone, for this very engaging and candid conversation. Lambi, let me come over to you so we can invite our callers to call in, and then we will go over to Facebook to get some comments.
There was a caller on the line for a while now. Let's see if he's still there. Caller, you still there?
Yes, I'm still there.
Sorry to have you waiting so long. Please go ahead.
My apologies.
Good evening, Ms. Simone. Good evening to your guests, and good evening, Brother Lambi.
Good evening.
You know, before I can make an informed observation or comment, what exactly is toxic masculinity? What exactly is that?
Oh, I gave a whole long definition, but it's pretty much the idea that men are supposed to be aggressive and without emotion. And maybe you missed the part of the program where I mentioned it, but it's pretty much anti-women. Let's just say that, anti-feminine.
Okay, fine. Now, I grew up in a community called Marigat, and those sorts of discussions I'm hearing about toxic masculinity and this conflict with head of household. You have a government, you have a head. You have a corporation, you have a head. You have any kind of, even at the church, you have the chairman of whatever committee is the person who is at the head or supposed to be taking final responsibility for decisions made by the group. But I was just going into the Marigat situation. I grew up in Marigat where women were the ones who controlled literally the finances. In fact, most of the lands were owned by the women, and when they got married or the husbands and so, the husband worked, the women collected them, and they ran the home. They managed the home. There was no conflict with this thing. I mean, they had the normal, little family disputes and so. But I kind of have a difficulty. Different people have different experiences, and your environment determines how you look at things and how you examine things. Because I know instances where the husband and the wife, they both went to the farm. They both, did work together. On harvesting day, the man harvest. The lady went to collect the money and gave him some funds to go down the road and have a drink or something like that. But she determined books for the children, their clothes and their school and that kind of stuff. When I was growing up, as a young boy, I grew up with my grandmother, and I was responsible for my younger sister because my mother was off in England. And so we took turns. If I did the, go and set the water, the wood and this thing and scrub the house and clean the yard this week, my sister went to the river. The next week I went to the river and she did that. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little confused to the extent that I get troubled when we import some of these cultural terminology that they use in these big countries where people, have different experiences, different backgrounds, and then we transplant them. We have a problem with young people or men basically abusing women. Now, I don't think that is from toxic masculinity. That is just because either they are badly brought up, poor training, uneducated, don't understand certain things in society. There is no social environment in which they can gather and understand what really it is. And so our morality, our spirituality, all these things have been decimated and broken down. So there is nothing, the church has even failed to a very large extent now. And I think the brother made a very good point that basically when it says that it didn't mean that the man will, be over, it's just that somebody has to be the ultimate responsible person. That's what it is. But they work together. It's done all the time in homes where this partnership works cohesively. You find wholesome, children who respecting, because I know growing up in the village, you couldn't go down the road and swear. Mm-hmm. Anybody in the village here you swear is likely to discipline you, and you can't go home and complain because you'll get more. So they took a village. Yep. It is the concept of the environment. What is the environment in which you are brought up? Mm-hmm. So if people are brought up in an environment, I think some of the people are suggesting that you should be scolding your parents. I mean, how can children scold their parents? You have an issue, you have a discussion in the home where there's a discussion between parent and child. But now you see, parents can't talk to children, children can't talk to parents, people, it is just a crazy, crazy world. Mm-hmm. And I think it is more the societal and these sorts of things. When you explain it to somebody about toxic masculinity, the way some man behaves, it has nothing to do, it has to do with the environment in which he grew up and the particular way in which he responds to his peers. Mm-hmm. If he goes down the road and he has an issue, and he and his peers probably formulate his mind because he has lost his thought, his own ability to think.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Robinson, for your contribution. We certainly appreciate it, because you are correct that we grew up, even I as a young girl grew up in an environment where women were dominant. I mean, we had Mary Eugenia Charles as our prime minister. So I think we
15
we
years.
all grew up, at least my generation did, and we continue to see it in Dominica, that there are many strong women in positions of power in Dominica, and we're going to give out the phone numbers in just a minute. But again, like we said in the beginning, this is only one aspect of the problem. So Mr. Robertson is absolutely correct that our morality, our spirituality, our environment, there's so many other factors. But let me just say this, the terminology of toxic masculinity might be new to us, but the evidence is real. The evidence on
Very
the
real.
ground is real, that because there are changing roles, women are having greater earning power, that we are seeing a backlash to this whole concept of the strong woman. A lot of women walk around talking about being strong women, and there is a backlash. So we're not saying that is the only reason we may be seeing domestic violence in Dominica, but it is contributing to the reason, because men feel threatened. Some men feel threatened with regards to women who are supposedly taking over their roles, and rather than seeing it as a partnership, they see it as a threat to their masculinity. But again, Mr. Rumsfeld, I want to thank you for your contribution to the discussion. There's so much to cover on this topic, so I hope, I see Glenda's already asking for a part two. I hope that we will have the opportunity to continue the conversation. So let us give out the phone numbers so we can engage the callers.
You're listening to Roots Connection and Q. The numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers one more time. 449-309-596 and 97, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. Back to you, Simone.
Yes, and let's take some comments. So, Pini, I know that you're watching from St. Thomas. Great to have you on board. Colson Shillingford, great to see you as always. October's say, to answer that question, we have to address the mechanisms within socialization that objectifies the female gender. And guys, take a note of any of the comments that you want to provide a response to when I'm done reading the comments. We can also examine the phenomena of women themselves presenting themselves as sex objects. Seemingly, the sexualization of music and fashion only helps to promote and reinforce the culture. So, October's, thank you for that. Hazel Ann Anthony, great to see you. Anthony Simon out there enjoying Dominica, great to have you on board. Good evening, Doc, and panel listening from Calabishi tonight on the island. Good to have you on board, Anthony. October's, my granny used to say, Lil, make sure no woman can cut style on you. So I learned to cook, wash, clean, iron, the whole 9 yards. So I grew up being taught gender neutral, but in the context of a partnership, independence becomes interdependence. Once that dynamic changes, everything changes. It's one thing to be responsible for yourself and to complete other, to be responsible for others. The toxic is when you objectify another human being. David Bertrand out there in the UK, always great to see you. Good evening, Dr. Simone, listening. Hazel and Anthony. Didi Esther, good evening, Dr. Simone, and the rest of the panel. Glenda says, I think she tagged a few people, so thank you for that. Glenda, don't forget to tag others. She says, very interested and important topic, part of their responsibility as well. So thank you for the comments. Glenda Antihami, very good topic. Let's take some comments from someone we haven't heard from. Well, let's take Glenda's. Relationships, life in general would be so much more well-balanced if there was more partnership amongst each other. Veronica Pascal, agree with Honore. Home is the first place of learning, I think is what she meant. Hazel Ann, do you know that some men don't like responsibility? They leave everything for the lady to do. And that is the source of contention, because there you have it, that women may now be more engaged in the workplace. And then because the housework everything involving the house and the child rearing is considered women work. She now has to go out and work a 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 and come back and be responsible for all the household responsibilities. So that is a source of contention. Julian, men feel emasculated without being belittled. Talk 1 to TLC. Hey, great to see you, Deborah. I love it, Rasmo. Teresa, wow, what a valuable discussion. Someone we haven't heard from yet. Judith Cochran, very interesting discussion. Teresa, yes, I, Rasmo. Let's take from somebody we haven't heard from. Peter Thomas, good night. Nice to see you, Peter. Janine, thank you. They use the term traditional, but they are not referring to Dominican traditional. So guys, thank you so much. Thank you for all your comments. Keep them coming. And back to the panel. Any comments you would like to make on the comments?
I would just like to add a few to what a few points to what the caller said. Growing up, my mom was also hardworking. My mom went in the fields. She did a lot of work, just as my father did, and sometimes I believe even she worked harder. But I noticed that she always understood her position, and that is why I keep coming back to the idea that it's a matter of a misunderstanding, in that
Yes.
we do not understand the scriptures and what the scriptures it has taught us. When we look at the home, if we were to ask the question, who designed the home? Did man design the home? No, man did not design the home. God designed the home. God designed the family, and he has a prescription. In other words, he highlighted the different roles of males and females. And I believe once one understands his or her role, then they will be able to function as partners, because that's what they really are. The two have become one flesh. When we look at the whole concept of marriage, when one gets married and it's done in the right way, that rib is returning to you. So that man is now whole. And as a result of he being whole, he now has that helpmate to help him on that journey. So they're on that journey together as partners. But obviously, in any relationship, if you look at the institution, there must be a head. And God has given the prescription or the role to the man. And I don't think that we are fully ready for a solution, because to me the solution is to go back to the idea and the ideologies that we have been taught from God's words and implement it in the home.
So let me ask you this question, Dexter, as I try to engage you. And Rasma, I'm going to come to you because I know you have a lot to contribute. So let's take a situation where a man is not living up to his responsibilities. He's not providing. He's not helping in the household. Is he still considered the head of the household?
Of course, he is still the head.
So he's the head simply based on his anatomy.
He still is the head, and he needs to be acknowledged as the head.
The man is the head of the house.
No,
despite the fact that he's not living up to any responsibility.
He could be educated. So
that's illogical, you know.
Okay, so let's take Rasmus' view.
It's illogical to say, you know, I mean, like he's not taking responsibility, or it's like a captain on the ocean with a boat, and he's got a compass, but he's going in the wrong direction, which means he's not gonna dock that boat safely. You understand? You know, the thing about it is, man even give Godship to man. You know, we never seen God, but we says a man, and we believe, right? So there's a possibility. The way you talk about God make that house and design that house, in my house, I can move the camera around and my wife set it up. They're better than us at that, man. So, but I want to go back to the whole thing of toxic masculinity. Here's the thing. It's a belief system, right? And society has a problem with power, all right? Each one of us on the panel there and everybody listening has a certain amount of power. And it goes across several sectors of society: gender, color, race, okay, wealth, education, okay. So when we have that kind of power, there's a certain response. Every power, everything, every responsibility, there's responsibility that goes with the power you have. Able, disabled, how do you treat people who are disabled? Okay, how do you think about them? Okay, so the whole thing of superior, inferior, it's about accepting people as your equal and treating them that way.
Yeah, and I want to thank you, Dexter, because I think what you're pointing out to us is so much of this comes from our belief system. So if we follow a religious doctrine, our perspective might be different from somebody who follows a more secular doctrine. So I think there's a lot, there are many layers of this onion to unravel, to show where our belief system comes from with regards to gender roles. So I want to thank you for that. Vaughn, I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, you pose a very important question to Brother Dexter. And guys, from the very same scripture he read in Ephesians 5, that was one of our first Bible studies for the youth. And I tell you, it was very hot because some women had a problem with the submission part when the man begins to fail or fall short in his responsibilities. So they were like, if this guy is not carrying out his responsibilities, they are not going to sit back, for example, and let the house come crashing down, and the man is there to fix it, to get up and do it.
Give me 1 second, Vaughn. Do we have a call, Lemby? Okay, go ahead, Vaughn. Sorry.
Yeah, so the man has to man up and really love his family and take care of his family. However, there are times that he falls short, and so the woman tend to want to take the lead. But a wise woman will sometimes call a few shots, but she will still acknowledge the man as the head of the home. You understand? In order to avoid conflict and in order not to belittle him. So it's all about mutual understanding. Let me just bring something to our understanding. If you are in a house with a man, it could be a boyfriend, it could be your husband. At 12 o'clock, there is a loud rumbling on the door. Who do you believe is the first person that should respond to that knock at that time of the night? Naturally, the woman expects the man. Naturally, the woman expects the man to stand up and to confront whatever is behind that door. I'm not saying a woman cannot do it, but women look to men for security naturally. And so if they can't find that security from you, that's why a woman may tend to lean towards another man, which may give her that security. I'm just speaking in general. So we are not here to belittle anyone, but I'm saying the genetic makeup of the man, his natural makeup, masculinity, everything, it places him in that position to lead, so to speak. And his wife, his girlfriend work with him, and it's not a matter of belittling your partner because there are areas she will be stronger than you are, maybe educational wise, managing finances and so forth. But I'm just telling you, looking at it from a natural perspective, I don't expect my wife to take the pickaxe and throw the ground. I will take the pickaxe and throw the ground. She will sow the seed. She may help to water with the garden. I don't expect my wife to do the most strenuous work, but the framework of man, his body skeletal structure is so designed so he can take on more, of this strenuous work, and his wife or whoever is by his side will take on the lighter task. But it doesn't mean that he's a slave master to his wife. So I want us to get that context clear tonight. We are not saying in terms of he being the leader of the head, as he has the final say and so forth. All right, guys?
Yeah. I certainly get where you're coming from. Rational, let me come to you. Let me come to you. Go ahead.
Two things. One is the biological, physical, okay. But the idea of who gets up, that's psychological. It's conditioning.
And
And
why?
that's what, when we talk about toxic masculinity, that's what we're talking about. Big boys don't cry. Okay, and it's about entitlement. Where that entitlement comes from? And it's oppressive. Every form of oppression has entitlement. Okay, and it comes in different ways: discrimination, ageism. You know.
Yeah. And Janine is making a point on Facebook. She says physical strength doesn't make you a leader. So I think, again, we can look at this from different perspectives. Religious is one of them. But I also want us to look at other influences. So we have religion, which we covered very nicely. But let us talk about other influences that shape gender roles, the influence of music, the influence of media. What are your thoughts in terms of how these may be shaping the perspective of the gender roles in our society? So let's have a conversation about that. I think we have a call coming in. Perfect timing, caller.
Good evening, caller. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead, please.
You never see a woman living war in a battlefield. Right, always a man. Any question?
Thank you, sir.
Women have been fighting on the front line in wars as well. So just to answer your question, women have been fighting in wars on the front line. But the influence of music, how does that shape our views on gender roles? Anyone can go first.
Will you mind if I go?
Go.
Okay,
yeah, man, go ahead.
So, I'm older than you, right? And Lambi can maybe testify to that. Mighty Sparrow, I mean, like, he was the king of Calypso. I mean, he sang some nonsense, right? You know, and he got away with it because for that generation at that time, right? If we come down to hip hop, right, which is like the most popular American music, right? The whole thing of objectification, because they say video beat a radio star, right? So video outdid, right? And those visual images of the role of half-naked women to men fully dressed and pouring champagne over their bodies. That's what objectification is. And when your 10, 11, 12-year-old looks at that, they get message, right? Because these are powerful images, even subliminal, right? And that's how women are treated. They're less than. The men are dressed, the women are, you know what I mean? So that is what objectification is, right? And so we learn it in so many ways. One of the main ways is through movies and music. And every generation has been corrupted by different lyrics and images. And right now the images are getting worse. And Dominica has a scourge of smut, playing in public, loud, you know, disrespectful to women. So it's toxic. That's what we're talking about. It's toxic. Vibes are important. Music is important, right? Culture is important. But we don't have the society rebelling against freedom of speech. I'm for. You know, I'm a radical, you know. I'm for freedom of speech. But smart man in public places, it's so disrespectful, especially to our women. And those videos, I see youngsters in Dominica trying to do the same thing. So, I mean, the B word, listen, man, the 60s, late 60s, I can remember well because, okay, I was young, you know, but 70s, protest, Black Power, sisters, you know, it's not just church. If they had melanin in the skin, that was your sister. So you treat her with respect. And there was a consciousness. We were brothers. not N's and B's. And that's a whole generation, right? So I spent hours in juvenile jail working with young people to tell them that is not, this is, it's not normal. And girls tell me, but she's my friend, I can call her that.
Nope.
They think it's a way to be friend. But you know what it means, what the word means? Words have meaning and they have power. You know, words sound as power. And we have to know the power of those words. And we have to teach that to our children. So when I work with boys, I try to get them to understand the power of words, the power of communication. I try to give them the gift of communication. I teach them to write. I teach them to use metaphors and similes, you know, and strengthen their language, their literary skills, and to think critically, consequential thinking. Because, you know, men who believe that stuff, they become isolated, you know. When you talk about domestic violence, like Mr. Robinson spoke about, men who abuse their partners, their female partners, they become isolated. You know?
Yeah, thank you, thank you, Rasmo, for that. So let me come over to Dexter and Vaughn, because you guys are on the ground. And even today, I haven't heard the song, I won't be listening to it, but there was yet another seemingly very vulgar song released. I don't know if you guys, I know, you know, Vaughn is on Facebook, so by now he must have heard what is going on with that new song. But what is the role of our Booyah music, in particular, the lyrics of the song, with regards to how women are seen, how girls are seen in Dominica? Vaughn.
Yes, you're so right. Even as we speak, there is this war on Facebook over lyrical, content that has been shared a little bit explicit and so forth. And music is one of the most powerful mediums via messages can be conveyed, to the public, to the masses, and it happens so quickly in seconds, especially now because of the media. But our music in Dominica, some of it has been drifting for a while now in terms of how we appreciate ladies. And I will just quote a line from one of the songs that the guys sang. Oh my goodness! Tell me my power go off, boy. Shoot.
No, you're here. We can hear you. Okay, I think he might need to plug his phone in. So while he does that, Dexter, let me come to you.
As he mentioned, the music is one of the influencers, and I'm paying attention, I'm listening. And if we are not careful, this word toxic that we are using will be a good word. It will be a word that will resonate within the minds of the people, and they'll accept it as good. The scripture does tell us that in times, in the latter days, good will be called evil and evil will be called good. So we're talking about music and its influence. We are seeing how the music is changing the mindset of our young men, even our young girls. Our music is teaching our young men to be more violent, to be more aggressive. If you listen to some of the lyrics from Jamaica, even Trinidad, you question, why is the society so vulgar, so violent? It is in the music. In music right now is sex, violence, and money. And if you notice, a lot of the young people, that's where their focus is. That's where their attention, that's what they want to attain, And I could recall listening to a song a few years ago, and the artist talked about shooting men or some people in broad daylight. And it wasn't long after I saw that a video of a man who shot down a woman in broad daylight in St. Lucia. And it happened in different areas as well. So it is very clear that our young people, they are feeding in and they're buying into the messages that are being shared within those songs, and it's altering their way of thinking, and as a result, their action changes. We are what we think. And if we are going to bring about a change, we have to start changing the way we think. We can think the same way and expect a different result. That's the recipe for insanity. So therefore, I believe a lot of education needs to take place, or re-education, so that our young people can, live better lives because their thinking has been cleared. So to me, it has a lot to do with our thinking, and the influence of music is just getting ridiculous right now. I
Mhm.
study words, and the interesting thing about that is you hear the bus drivers passing with their songs,
Mhm.
the school children, they're listening to it. I heard my daughter singing a song the other day, and I had to stop her. I don't play those music at my home, but she hears it out in the public, on the school buses. And the young people from a very tender age, they're being influenced. And Rasmus said it earlier on, words are so powerful. And the more they recite those words, it is going to resonate within them and be a part of them. And as a result of that, they're going to display it in society. They're going to be violent. They're going to be sexually aggressive and all of those things.
Yeah, and it's teaching women and men the value of women, because when you're degrading a woman in a song, and you're talking about her private parts, it teaches us in society that that is the worth of a woman. Her
Yeah.
sexuality is her worth. So if that is her worth, then that is what she ought to be used for. And if she objects to it, then you create a situation where you might have a conflict. Rasmo, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. I just want to strengthen what you're saying. And it's not just the words, Sometimes the visual has no relationship to the words. So only thing it's showing is certain body parts. So visually what you do, you cut her out into pieces in terms of like what you think is important for what you want to show. So it really it dissects women, women's bodies.
Yeah.
And that objectification in the media is a dangerous thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
the interesting thing about that as well is that some of our young ladies, it is sad that they're embracing those descriptive words, or how do I say that? This diminishing words,
Mm-hmm.
if that is an appropriate word to use. They accept it, they embrace it. They identify themselves with it. And when our young people start identifying themselves with those words, they eventually going to live it. They will execute it.
Yes, Rasmo, you were gonna say.
Yeah, let me tell you, the thing about it is they internalize the
Yep.
girls, they internalize these words, right? I was working in a program that was connected to a juvenile jail, and the program was for girls, right? And at the time, there were a lot of songs about pimp, 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 pimp. That was a common term, right? So I used drama for the young people to tell their stories, all right? Or to tell stories, so that we can analyze the impact of different beliefs and different practices on society. And this young woman, she began to tell me about the hierarchy in the prostitution industry.
Wow.
In a way, listen, 15 years, man. 15-year-old girl, right? And she was very talkative, and she talked fast, and she was going. When she was done, the session was done. I walked out of that session, and I told my boss, I don't have the capacity to go through another session with a young person of that age talking about that level of violence and exploitation, sexual violence and exploitation. And the thing about it is, I knew what she was saying was true. It wasn't just, she wasn't making up stuff. Because I had worked with men older than her talking about the industry. Because what I'm working to do is to undo that stuff in a practical way. So I knew, and to talk to the men about it, they were young adults. So it was okay. But to hear, man, it broke my heart, man. I walk out of there and cry. And I told my boss, listen, I don't think I can handle it. You know, I had 30-something therapists on staff, you know, with the organization I was working, you know.
Yeah,
And I was like, you
and
know,
again,
man,
and again, all of this speaks to the value of women and girls in our society. But before the time runs out on us, guys, we have to talk about how do we reverse all this toxic masculinity, the fact that men are told be a man, don't cry, the fact that they're told to be aggressive physically, sexually promiscuous, taking risks, engaging in activities traditionally viewed as feminine. So how do we reverse all this toxic masculinity, the role of the church, the role of role models? Where do we go from there? But before we do, I saw some pretty interesting comments on the Facebook Live. So let me just grab a couple of comments before we run out of time. DJ Match Selassie Kenrick says, yeah, because when the workload gets heavier, there are others that can lead important and unexpected role. The individual continues by saying, we see so much fulfilling prophecy when it is said that what is dangerously wrong will be termed good, and goodness, well, we are seeing. So I think we're seeing good become bad and bad becoming good. Let's see who else we have. Talk 1 to TLC Deborah, what a shame. Must be banned in public place. Our children are groomed in so many ways. Deborah, you're absolutely correct. And DJ Match again, how can you bring education to the people and not wisdom? How do you expect change? Sorry, but education will not take us there. It will be wisdom. So again, and one more comment from DJ Match. If we have people of wisdom in our leadership, they will put the correct educated people in the places that demand their expertise, but now all people educated themselves for money and will be placed in any position because people of wisdom is not in charge to make the important decisions. So guys, thank you so much for all your comments. Let us talk about reversing this. Where do we begin? Where do we start? Do we start with the socialization? Do we start with counseling? Rasmo, you've already done an excellent job of telling us some of your intervention approaches. So I think we have to take this from a position where when this masculinity is becoming toxic, we have to find ways to educate our young men to be to counteract what they are experiencing in society. So how do we do this? How do we monitor those who may be potentially at risk for being violent, right? How do we monitor them? Also, what is the intervention? So somebody has committed an offense. What is the role of law enforcement? Are these men being prosecuted? Are they being held accountable? So I think that is a whole other conversation topic, but how do we reverse toxic masculinity? Dexter, let me begin with you. I think Vaughn is still trying to log in. His phone died.
I will say, I've said it earlier on, and I believe it's via education.
Yes.
And someone in the comments said that education won't help, right? Wisdom. But the question I have is, what is wisdom? Wisdom is defined as the proper application of knowledge, being able to use knowledge aright. What we need people who can convey that knowledge and help teach young people how to use the knowledge that they have. And Rasmo, I'm not too sure if you could recall, about 6 or 7 years ago, we met in the old market, and we had a long conversation. I don't know if you could recall that.
don't
But
remind me.
it,
Yeah, I remember. I remember.
You're muted. Dexter, you're muted.
Dex, you muted.
get used to muting as soon as I'm through speaking.
Right.
But it requires a lot of education and people who will teach the young people how to use the education that they have in a wise way. We have to start now. And if we do not start, and if we do not continue, rather, our young people, I don't know what it's going to be like for them. And
Yeah, and even within the homes.
yes,
Because, like you said before, everything begins in the home. So even within the homes, we have to, stop shunning our boys because they're experiencing emotion. They're trying to talk to us, and we're telling them to, come out from there because, you're a boy. You should be strong. You should be manly. We have to listen. I think it begins with simply listening and probing. So we get the same way you ask those questions of the young men. Dexter, is the same way we ask probing questions to find out what is going on with them. What are they being socialized to believe? It begins with the examples we're setting in the home. Are we tolerating, negative behavior on either part in the household, whether it's the mom, the dad, the aunts, the uncle, the senior members of the home? What are the examples that they're setting for the children? What are the examples that they're setting for the young men? Are they saying to all the girls, oh, you have to cook, you have to clean, you have to do the laundry, and then the boys are excluded from that? So a lot of it begins within the home with regards to how are we socializing our boys? How are we socializing our girls? Are we teaching them equality of roles? Are we teaching them, you're a partner? So this Sunday, the boy cooks, next Sunday, the girl cooks, right? So are we teaching them the importance of being a partner in a relationship as opposed to one person being superior because you will grow up to learn to earn the money, and the other person being inferior because you'll just stay home and cook and clean. So I think a lot of it begins in the home. Dexter, I'm going to come back to you, and let's hear from Vaughn before he disappears again.
My apologies.
Nice to have you back.
My apologies, but picking up from the slack, how do we go about, reversing that cycle? From a church point of view, the church needs again to look at things in a holistic way, simply because life is balanced. So we cannot just dispense Bible alone and don't give them the physical aspect of life. We have to look at empowering our people in a holistic manner. So we teach finances, we teach economics, we teach health benefits, psychology, how to cope with stress and so forth. And just to take a holistic approach in the whole education, of the roles, of men and women, children in the family will go a mighty long way. And also to help our young men understand that, it's okay to show emotion and so forth. And also, we need to reverse that thing that society is trying to instill in the minds of the people, that because you're a man, you can go out there and have so many different sex partners. But the moment that a woman has one sex partner, then she becomes, a nasty or some sort of things like that. And we get that feedback a lot from society. So it takes a lot of educating to reverse, some of the things that we've been taught were right, but the way that we are doing it, our methods are wrong. We need to revisit a lot of the structure in the home, in a holistic way so that we can reverse that toxic masculinity. So it starts in the home. The church has its role to play. The school has its role to play. Each and everyone has their role to play to deal with that
Yes, thank you
situation.
for that. And I think we have a call coming in. Thank you, Vaughn.
Good
You're
evening, caller.
welcome.
Please go ahead.
Good night.
Good night.
I am listening to this, but of all the programs you were speaking, it's very good. But and we did not even speak about introducing the children to God. Because in the olden days when you used to grow up, people used to take their children to church, tell them about God and these things there. But this has lost its savor. Children don't no longer go to church. They will go to a party for a bit somewhere. We'll go. But you have to train up the child the way he should, and when he grow old, he'll not depart from it. Though sometimes children grow up in the Christian realm and they still leave and they go. But we have to introduce them to God. Because you're saying if you build a house and the foundation is not good, what going to happen to the house? It's going to fall down. So you must have a foundation for the children. So I had my children, I struggled a lot. But I had to be there as a mother and a father. The father left them. It's just a whole mess I get back to him. But I became a Christian. And that is where I got to understand the things of God. Yes, sir? And teach my children about God. And I had to be a mother and a father to stay. When they come home, they see me there. Come at night, all the time I'm there, talking to them, telling them what is right and what is wrong. Today, my children are there doing. Only one that is still outside still, but I still talk to him as well as that. But I'm saying that Christ is the answer of everything. And with the submission you were talking about, the submitting, even though they say head, it doesn't mean a head. It is a leader in the home. The man, no matter what it is, the man is the head, the leader of the home. And the man has to submit himself as well as the lady has to submit. His communication is important. When you cannot communicate, that is where the trouble starts. You have to learn to communicate, and the voice has to go down low and humble ourselves in meekness and gentleness. And if we don't have that, that is it. And still, we still have to remember that the Bible says in 2 Timothy chapter 3, terrorist time is coming. So it's not much better going to get better. It's going to get worse. But we have to ensure this to strength to God. And if we don't have that, it makes no sense.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, caller. Very well said. Thank you so much for your contribution. So, Rasmo, let me come over to you, because in my mind, I'm thinking, how do we create an action plan? So we talk about it starts within the home. We talk about the importance of monitoring those at risk. We talk about intervention approaches such as the therapy that we're doing. But with the power of technology, Rasmo, how can we engage someone like you who has spent, I'm assuming by now, decades in the field of working with young men and young women? How can we create an action plan that includes those with your expertise to bring that to Dominica?
Okay, here, I want to commend you on the way you started the program by giving us the assignment to speak to young men, right? In working with young people, I want to hear your voice, and I want to start with their perspectives, And so I use a popular education method. So I begin with their perception on the themes we're going to explore. Right? So they have their voice. And listen, I create a space. I create a space. If I'm in juvenile jail and they say, I cannot write a song without, because first they have the ideas and I say, okay, let's begin to create stuff about that. I can't write a song if I do cost. I say, okay, cost. And then later I revisit it and say, you can't perform that in an assembly during Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? Your probation officer, your judge, they're going to be there seeing you. So you have to show it in good light. So let's think about the words that you can substitute and all that stuff. And in that way, they learn to express themselves, right? So the communication skills are built. But the important part is listening. Let them say what they need to say. Another example of that is I create a space. I was working with kids who were caught in school. They were from Cambodia and places like that, right? So the parents went through the killing fields and all that stuff, right? Parents and grandparents. And so they started to give me a list, right? And so the person who invited me is there looking and he said, but Rasmo, why are you letting them say that stuff? Because they wanted to be in a classroom where they could smoke marijuana. They wanted a space where they could be with their girlfriends, and do whatever they want, sort of like youth space, and adults can't come in there. And they spoke a whole lot of that stuff. And I put it on it was a chalkboard at the time. I put it on the chalkboard and I say, listen, you go to high school, okay, for 4 years, 5 years. What kind of man you gonna be at the end of that? And they said, dumb. They said that, I didn't. I said, well, let's talk about that and revisit your perception of what you need to succeed in high school. And they say ESL, English as a second language. But the fact is, giving them the opportunity to express what they wanted. and just tolerating that and then revisiting it in a critical way. Critical thinking is important. Consequential thinking skills. You know, if I do this, so they think twice before they make a decision, but looking at themselves. So the question is, what kind of man are you? Where you want to be in 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years? Who you gonna be? What you gonna be? What you need to get there? How you gonna get there? Right? Because we're not given those skills in high school. You know, if you don't have somebody who's been to college or university, you're not even aiming to that because you don't have that example in your life. It's only a couple generations now that, you know, that people have more and more, right? So, you know, maybe your teacher, you know, some youth worker or something, right, might influence you. So it's about creating that space. Dominica, what we need is more non-profit, more civil society. That's what I benefited from. And that's what I spent my life doing. I worked all over Dominica, all over, you know, doing theater, doing drama, Paybush, Capuchin, Vekas.
Yeah, and you know, I just hope we can find a way to engage you, Rasmo, and others with the expertise in this area, because I think what we're seeing is the need for just giving our young people the space to speak freely. So many times young people will start to try to have a conversation with us, and what do? We interject, we interrupt, we jump in, we cut them off. Sometimes what is necessary is that we simply allow them to speak without interruption, without consequence, without the threat of being seen as, you know, you're being silly, you're not sounding intelligent. Just give our young people. So I'm calling for, you know, a youth symposium, a men's symposium, where instead of trying to be the experts, where we're telling you the information, men and boys are simply able to pour their hearts out, to say what is on their mind, to say the pressures that they're feeling in this society, to say how it is impacting them, because they need to vent, they need to get the emotions out. And that, to me, in my mind, is the first step in moving forward. And again, you know, I just want to remind us that we're not saying that toxic masculinity is the only reason for domestic violence, but it certainly plays a very important role in the aggression that we see in some men. So I want to thank the panel. I want to thank everyone for being here. I'm going to give you an opportunity to share your final thoughts, and also how folks can get in touch with you if they would like to communicate with you. You're certainly role models for our boys and our men in society, and I'm happy that you took some time to join us today. And keep in mind that this is only the first part of the conversation that we started in January about overcoming the scourge of domestic violence. We will have an opportunity to talk about empowering our women financially and other areas that can help to stem this violence against women, so that we're not facing another situation of these tragic deaths in Dominica. But let me give you guys an opportunity for your final thoughts and to share any contact information that you would like to provide to the audience if they would like to get in touch with you. Vaughn, we'll go with you.
Yes, thanks again. And indeed, it is a great pleasure to be here with us tonight. But moving forward in terms of addressing the whole issue, let me just take the slack from Brother Ras. You see the aspect of creating that atmosphere where people can confide in you. That is something that we as role models, we need to continue, because a lot of persons out there have a lot of issues and they want to come out, they want to speak, but the lack of confidentiality is missing. So we need to be that shoulder, that support system. For example, can a homosexual walk up to you and tell them about their homosexuality? How did they come about, being a homosexual? And there are homosexuals that have reached out to me. So we as leaders in society have to create that atmosphere where young people can come and pour their heart to you without having the fear of being judged. Sometimes in society we are a bit too judgmental and too fast, to carry out a sentence and to assassinate someone. We need to take time to listen to the issues that are affecting our young people. For example, the recent thing that happened to the guy that produces music. He has good music and he has this music that has gone out of tangent. But how do we address that if we don't engage him, dialogue with him? You understand? And we cannot make him feel like he's the worst when there are other persons in society saying a whole bunch of garbage and no one is condemning it. So I find sometimes we tend to be hard on our young people, and that's when we start to lose them because they create that defense and that wall around them when they feel like we are suppressing them and oppressing them. So let us be ministers of grace to create that atmosphere where persons can dialogue with us on any issue. All right. So, well, I am normally on Facebook, and anybody can contact me on Facebook, but my personal contact information, is 614-6078. And so you can always feel free to contact me and touch base with me on one-on-one. For example, after the recent tragic incidents we had with the murder, I had to conduct a vigil session with some other persons in the Kalinago territory and, offer some form of strength and support. And some of the family members have contacted me and reached out to me privately, for more support and so forth. So we all have our roles, played and cut out for us. So may we, in a collective way, continue to do just what we are doing. That's one of the ways that we can, mitigate that problem of toxic masculinity. So once again, thanks again for, just having me here, and it's a privilege. And I just bless everyone here.
Yes, and as we wait for the others to talk, Vaughn, you can go ahead and post your contact in the comment section on the Facebook Live if you want to, so that folks can reach out to you, and the other guests, you can do so as well if you would like our folks to be able to reach out to you. But Rasmo, how can we get in touch with you and your final thoughts?
Okay. Same way, if you contact me through Facebook, my Facebook name is Rasmo Moses. I have 2 pages. One is Pink and Blue Acts for Violence Prevention, and the other is it's about DV Awareness Month. It was a gender violence and you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it could be maybe peace, gender, and violence.
But they can reach you on Facebook at
But if you just contact Rasmo Moses,
yeah,
and you're serious about communication,
Mm-hmm. Do you have an email address you can share with us?
Yeah, rasmomoses@gmail.
Okay, excellent. So thank you for that. Thank you so much. Dexter.
At the beginning, I thought 2 hours was a long time, but look how time has gone by so quickly.
Yep.
It was a pleasure being here, and to our audience, I would just like to encourage all who are godly to return to God and allow His words to direct you, to guide you. And I believe if we change the way that we think, I believe we can change our lives. The Bible tells us, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. I think we need to renew the way we think. And one of the ways we can renew the way we think is by re-educating ourselves. And that's one of the process. I have aligned myself with a few young men like myself, and we have started a non-profit organization. We are looking to register it, called AIR. The objective of AIR is to bring love to the people in a more tangible way. We want to, assist people with their daily lives. And more so, we have a team of counselors ready and capable of assisting, because we do know that there are a lot of young people going through a lot in their lives, and they really need the help. So I want to call out on all church leaders, all church leaders to come out. I would like to put myself out there. My telephone number is 295-4365. I'm willing to be a role model to anyone who's willing to listen to what I have to say and listen to the few words that will share to influence them.
Yeah, so guys, don't forget, if you would like to post those phone numbers, email addresses, you can do so in the comments section on the Facebook Live. But I want to thank you. I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank you for your contribution. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing behind the scenes to empower our young men to be an asset to your community. I want to thank our listeners worldwide on Q95 FM Radio Lambi. Thank you for facilitating the calls, Showing and Shan, Mr. G and the Q95 family. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Don't forget, for the best of programming, to jump on Q95DA.com and follow us on Q95 FM Radio on Facebook and YouTube, and also Push Past 10 on Facebook and YouTube, because this year, as we continue to invest in me, invest in us, it is all about collaboration. So if you want to find out more about how we are collaborating, and we hope to collaborate with our panel as well, you can visit pushpast10.com. We are doing a lot of collaborations. We are working with universities to offer scholarships to Dominicans. We are working with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. We're going to be working with East Dominica Federation with regards to domestic abuse and child sexual abuse. So we have a lot of work to do. So I hope that you will continue reaching out to me to be a part of this movement to support and move Dominica forward. And you can always reach me at pushpast10@gmail.com. So that is pushpast10 at gmail.com. So thank you, everyone. Again, we will be back in the next 2 weeks. Right after Carnival, we will be back for another engaging conversation. So we want to say thank you for being here. We will continue to tap into our human resources as we navigate this ever-changing world, and as we continue to look around and see the positive changes we need to impact on our society. So again, you've been listening to Roots Connections on Q. I am Simone Mathieu, and we discussed how can we overcome toxic masculinity as gender roles continue to change. We want to thank Vaughn, Vigilant, Rasmo Moses, and Mr. Dexter Honore for being our panel this evening. They did a fantastic job. Let's clap. And we hope to engage them again in the future. So guys, let's say good evening. You can unmute your mics as we say good evening to the audience. Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. Au revoir. Bientôt.
All right. Take care. Thank you, Rasmo.
Bye. Bye.
Right.
Lambi,
One-
thanks a lot, man.
One love.
Thank you,
One
Lambi.
love.
All right. Later,
Brother
guys.
Lambert,
Big up Lambert.
I saw that was
Q95.
you, you know.
All right, guys. Take care.
Take care.
Good night.
Thanks for the invitation.
Joe! Rastafari. Home, oh children, home. Wanna go home, oh yes, children, home. Got to go, yeah. We've been trodden from tendencies right on through revelation. We've been a subject to master's feet. So bliss, so we wanna go. Yeah, we are a people enslaved and sold, scattered through the earth. Jacob is calling his children 12 tribes, so we want go. Oh, children, home, home to Zion, home. Wanna go, take me there, home, oh, to Zion, home. Wanna go home, yeah. We've been trodden from Genesis right on through Revelation. We've been a subject to Master's feet, so blick, so we wanna go home. Oh, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and Zebulun, Isaac, God and Asher, Naphtali, Joseph, and Benjamin, 12 tribes, so we want go home. Oh, children, home. Oh, to Zion, oh, I wanna go home. Oh, children, home. Oh, take me home. Oh, I wanna go home. Yeah.